Hi, everyone.
Hello everyone, welcome today for our another session. We have Marcelo with us today again, who will train us about Azure Arc. So yes, over to you, Marcelo.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Let me share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, again.
Oh, great. So let's get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Marcelo Tokunaga. I'm a developer engineer from the Azure App Consult team, and I'm based in Brazil. Um, the Azure App Consult, it's a team where we work with the startups. Our main goal is to help the startups from the Founders Hub team and also the ProDirect support team. And we work with what we call the proactive work. So we can help providing guidance and architecture review for those customers. And as a developer, my specialty is it's all the development stack on Azure, including Kubernetes that we will talk today. And specifically today, I'm planning to show you a little bit about the Azure Arc. What is the purpose of the Azure Arc? How can you benefit from it? And also how does it applies to the Kubernetes? So what will be the agenda? I'll start talking about the Azure Arc, and then we'll dig into the Azure Arc Enable Kubernetes. In the end, I'm planning to show you a brief demo on how does it works. And to finish this session, we'll have a Q&A, time for Q&A. But if you have any doubts, anything that you would like to ask, you can raise your hand here using the reactions from Teams, or you can post a message to the chat. Okay, so let's get started. Let's start with the Azure Arc. The main purpose of the Azure Arc is to bring Azure services and management to any infrastructure, no matter where they run. And using it, you can extend Azure management, adopting cloud practices, even on an on-prem environment, and also implement Azure security anywhere. So the idea is that you can use Azure to manage all environments, no matter what to use, no matter if there's edge computing or if you're using multi-cloud or if you're using on-prem. The idea is that you can do all maintenance and governance of these platforms inside of the Azure portal. So basically, what you can do, you can organize and govern across multiple environments. You can manage your Kubernetes clusters using DevOps techniques, and you can deploy everything on a consistently way at scale. And also, you can deploy and manage your data services anywhere with it. These are the biggest features that we got inside of the Azure Arc. And then I'll present to you some scenarios where you can understand a little bit more how does it works. The first one is a scenario where a company wants to organize and govern across environments. I'll read the overview and the business requirements, and then I'll explain a little bit how does the Azure Arc can help here. So a large technology institution has sprawling server-based IT systems deployed in corporate data centers, hosters, and cloud. In addition, new DevOps practices result in an unknown number of servers that are connected to the corporate network but are running outside of identity and governance systems. So first of all, they have multiple places where they deploy, and they're lacking the governance of everything there. This sprawl is overwhelming, and it's impossible to apply consistent governance across the environment and meet compliance needs. So the main goal for them is to do the governance and meet these compliance needs. For business requirements, we have manage a mix of bare metal, Windows, and Linux servers, visibility across locations, OS flavors, and disparate systems, enable AT to apply at-scale governance and security policies across all servers, enable application owners to apply and audit to meet their own requirements, measure and remediate compliance at scale and down to the individual workload server. Based on these requirements, the Azure Arc can help doing the asset organization and inventory with a unified view in the Azure portal. So the main benefit here is that from a single place, you can check all your environments, no matter where they are deployed. They will achieve a universal governance anywhere through Azure Policy, because you can apply the same Azure policy that you're using inside of your subscription to all your resources, no matter where they are. The Azure Arc also will benefit from the built-in server compliance rules that already exist. We have a central compliance view across all servers. We can achieve that using the Azure Defender, where you can see and check everything that you need to be compliant. Server owners can view and remediate to meet their compliance, because you can apply specific identity to do the administration for each one of their resources. And Microsoft partners can implement governance for their customer environments. So a partner can also help the customers to organize their environments. These are some benefits that Azure Arc can bring to them with the Azure management. On the end, here are some sample screens. You can see all servers in a single place, no matter if they are VMs deploy it on Azure, or if you're bringing VMs from outside of Azure. You see everything on a single place. And this is a sample screen where you can see all the policies applied to your subscription, for example. Another scenario is how can we benefit from the Kubernetes app management at scale? So a retailer with hundreds of stores would like to move all in-store application to containers running on a Kubernetes. So they have more than 100 stores and want to make everything run the same software, have the same base. That's the idea. They are faced with the challenge of how to uniformly deploy, configure, and manage their containerized application across multiple locations. Because how can you maintain different versions of your application having more than 100 stores? It means that you have more than 100 clusters running on-prem, for example. This is the big challenge here. And also, it's not only about the applications itself. If you have a group of people, for example, that will do the support or maintenance of that, how can you guarantee that all this that you can use the same ID to all of them, for example? Here are some business requirements. Bootstrap a new store to fully run with an application and configuration that this store requires. So if you create a new store, how can you deploy a new application to there? Enable IT to apply and monitor at scale governance across all stores. That's what I was talking about. You have an IT team. How can you give permission to them to access all clusters? You have more than 100 to take care. Monitor the state of applications and configuration in all stores. So imagine if every cluster, every store have their own dashboards to keep track. You don't have a single place to check everything. That would be very difficult. How can I integrate DevOps and safe deployment practices for applications running in stores? If I have a new version of the application, how can I quickly deploy and do the and put the new version to everyone? And how can you allow region store IT to monitor and troubleshooting configuration issues for the stores? For that, we have the Azure Arc Enabled. So what you can do, you can asset organization and inventory with a unified view in the Azure portal. So from the Azure portal, you will see a list with all your Kubernetes clusters. At scale configuration and deployment based on subscription, resource groups, and tags. What happens is when you bring your Kubernetes cluster to Azure, you can bring it to a specific subscription, to a specific resource group and tags, because in the end, you will see that resource the same way you see resources that you deploy directly to to Azure. Okay. Also, you can implement a GitOps-based model for deploying configuration as code to one or many clusters, and application deployment and update at scale. Using GitOps and DevOps, what you can do, you can deploy the configuration associating the roles inside of your clusters with specific identities, and also do the deployment of the application. And if you have updates on this application, you can deploy it at scale. Source control-based safe deployment procedures bring rolling new applications and configurations. Using GitOps and DevOps, you have only one single piece of truth that will be your source control. In this way, you can safely deploy the same thing to all your clusters. And developer tooling agnostic. Use the tools that they want. So as you don't need to develop aiming for Azure Arc. You will develop to Kubernetes. So your developers can use any tool that they are familiar to create the applications, do their testing, monitoring, and all stuff. And here's a sample of how you can see. And again, sorry.
Sorry for late. Late.
Okay. Okay. So another thing that you can do, you can see from one single place all your Kubernetes Arc Enabled, and if you had any Kubernetes cluster, AKS cluster, you will see it in the same place. And also you can see from here that they are an Arc Enable, and you can see custom locations here as well if needed. And this is a sample screen showing how you can configure it. Basically, as a parameter, you can go there and just enable GitOps in the repo, applying some policies to it. So the same way you monitor and track and do the governance of your AKS, you can apply the same rules to the Kubernetes that are outside of Azure. So you can create a policy that will check if you have or not GitOps enabled on those clusters. Okay. And the third scenario that I got is about the data services anywhere. So you can run Azure data services anywhere. And the idea is an energy company aims for efficient and fully automated operation with AI environments. Customer operates various production sites as well as run utility transporting for extraction to retail distribution. Massive data volume at the edge and need real-time insights. So if you look at this graphic here, we have the private cloud, we have the edge, we have lots of data deployed on a private cloud, and we have the edge that will process this data. So it's essential for the business that this edge will be closer to the private cloud. This way it can do it can input more data and also do the model updates from time to time and publish it to the cloud. So the requirements are leveraging existing OEM hardware and OpenShift Kubernetes. So here we already have some Kubernetes running and some hardware, and they want to leverage and reuse that because they already invested money on it. So they need to keep using it. And also because of the large amount of data is essential that they can process this locally as well. Automation at scale for IT control system, for example, for the high availability, disaster recovery, backup, continuous integration, continuous deployment, and DevOps strategies. Latest innovation automatically deployed from edge to the cloud, and consistent security and governance. And how can Azure Arc help here? So in Azure Arc, no matter where you deploy, so they can fully reuse their hardware and their OpenShift environment. It's totally compatible. Always the latest and end support with Evergreen SQL and Azure SQL DB. As you're working with the Azure Data Services here, it will check and enable you to update the version for SQL and everything, and even the version of the data if needed on the on-prem environments. Elastic Scale on-prems with PostgreSQL Hyperscale. PostgreSQL Hyperscale can benefit of the idea on creating new nodes for the server closer to your where your data needs to be, because you can extend it to your on-prem hardware as well. Azure SQL Database Edge with built-in AI for real-time edge analysis, because you can deploy it and make it run inside of the edge devices. Automation at scale with unified management of all data and assets. Again, you will see a single place where you can do all the monitoring and management of everything that you got inside of your infrastructure. Market leading security and governance consistently deployed everywhere. Remember that we can sync all the identities, give custom permissions, use even role-based permissions, and also apply policies from the Azure policies. This way, you can have a consistently deployed environment for everything. And again, you can see everything from the portal. And you can simply deploy like this and select specific locations with the Arc locations for it. So about the Azure Arc, in the end, with Azure Data Services anywhere, you can bring data services to any infrastructure. You'll be able to be always current on latest version with automated deploys. You can elastic scale deployment resources in seconds, scaling up and down based on capacity. You have a unified management with a single view across all your infrastructure, and you can extend your Azure security no matter where you run, and you can decrease your cloud billing reusing your existing hardware investment. These are the benefits that you can have using the Azure Arc with the data services anywhere. And with the Azure management, you have the same experience using the same tools that you already use to manage your Azure subscription. So everyone that already are familiar with Azure will be able to use the Azure Arc because they have the same control plane. You see the same portal, you use the same tools for Shell, Bash, or CLI. You will see the same ecosystem and even can connect with the products and extensions from the marketplace itself. So you can see the same management services for monitoring, update, containers, backup, security center, and more, even Azure Defender and other tools that you can use to manage and govern everything. You have access to things for access and security for example, RBAC, Lux, subscriptions. You have all the same things and apply the same organization that you already have. You can use the same ideas to search index groups and tags the same way you do with any other resource on Azure. You can benefit from templates and extensions from marketplace or even the ARM templates to recreate things. And for governance and compliance, you can use the same logs, same policies, and same blueprints that we already have on Azure. And integrate, of course, with the services that you can run on Azure, making everything a single piece. And how can we do this? The Azure Arc will create some agents that will run on specific parts that will be deployed, most of them automatically. And these agents will do all this synchronization and conversation. So the only thing that you see when you go to when you need to do the governance or do administration or check the compliance or everything, what you need to do, you use the existing tools that you already have. So you access the Azure portal, you use the Azure CLI for doing your administration, you can use the Azure SDK to do some kind of integration, but it will be transparent to you. You just need to need more namespaces, more tools inside of the CLI, for example, but you will use the same way you use any other tool to do the administration. Okay. And on this second part, I want to discuss a little bit more on where Azure Arc Enabled Kubernetes can help you. Okay, so let's dig into that. What is the Azure Arc Enabled Kubernetes? Um, when you have the Kubernetes deployed to any environment, what you can do, you can bring it to your to Azure. So you can do the maintenance and everything else inside of Azure. These Kubernetes clusters are the ones that we call it as Azure Arc Enable Kubernetes. So after you enable these clusters, what happens is they appear in the Azure portal. They will gain an Azure Resource Manager ID as any other resources, and it will have a managing identity. Why is that important? Because most of the tools that you need, for example, to give permission or to use the role-based access, things like that, will require this kind of identification. And when you bring it to Azure, it will gain an identification specific for Azure. Okay. It will be placed in an Azure subscription and resource group as any other resource, because you always need a subscription and a resource group to create anything on Azure, and it wouldn't be different with the Arc resources. And as any other resource, you can apply tags. That's the one of the benefits. So it can help a lot on your governance. And here I have some supported scenarios. I didn't bring all of them, but here are the most important ones. So first of all, what you can do, you can connect Kubernetes that are outside of Azure. The idea is that if you're running something, no matter if they're running on any device, it can be an edge device, it can be a bare metal machine that you have on-prem. It can be a Kubernetes deployed to Google Clouds or deployed to AWS, for example. All of them you can connect and bring to Azure. What it will do? In fact, when you connect, it installs some agents inside of this cluster that starts to send information and apply information to the cluster. Okay. Based on that, after you bring everything to Azure, you can use GitOps to do the deployments and configuration. So with GitOps, you can synchronize this Kubernetes cluster with your single source of truth that will be a Git repository. In this Git repository, what do you have? You have, for example, all the configuration of your cluster, and it will deploy automatically. You synchronize it with GitOps. Also, you can make use of the Azure Monitor for containers. So you'll be able to check things like you can get the logs from your pods. You can get the memory and CPU usage of your pods. You can check the state of health of pods and nodes. For example, you can see your controllers. All things you can check. Basically, infrastructure information using the Azure Monitor for containers. You can also use the Azure Defender. So with the Azure Defender, you can track if that specific Kubernetes cluster is compliant or not with some standard that you need to apply to your full infrastructure. For example, if you need to be compliant to HIPAA, or if you need to be compliant with ISO or any other standard, then you can use Azure Defender to implement some policies and deploy it to your Kubernetes cluster. Also, it is totally compatible with the Azure policy. So you can apply policies at the level of the administration of your cluster and even for networking inside of your Kubernetes. You can make use of that. You can have custom locations, so you can track if a specific cluster is raising an error. You can track where it is. For example, going back to that use case that we read in the beginning, if you have more than 100 stores, easily you can check which store is having any issue, for example. And how can you do this? You just need to add this extension to your AZCLI, and you need to enable these three providers. And you can check if they are enabled on your subscription using these commands right after. Okay. And after that, you run a command where you simply create a resource group in a specific region that is compatible with the Azure Arc. You can get a list through the documentation, connect with the desired cluster, because when you use a tool like the kubectl, what you can kubectl is the tool, is the kube control, the command line tool that you use to do the administration of your cluster. And when you use this tool, you need to connect to the instance that you want to manage. So this is the step where you decide which connection you want to make. I'll show you how to do this. And what you do, you just apply this command after connecting. It will use Helm to deploy all agents to your Kubernetes cluster. Okay. These things I already did on my cluster because it takes some time and we would not have time to wait for it now. But I'll show you other things that you can do also. So I have here a Windows Terminal window, okay? And let me show you what I got. Let me open here. As I'm using a Windows machine, what I got for containers, I'm running a Docker desktop. Inside of Docker desktop, I think starting last year or the year before, they have now the possibility to create a cluster inside of the Docker desktop, so you can play around with the Kubernetes without needing to install a fully Kubernetes here. So you can enable it using this menu. Okay. And what I'll do, I will connect with the Kubernetes. In fact, I'm already connected. So if I use this tool that is the kubectl, I can use it to run some commands like get all, for example. It will get everything that is installed on the default namespace. So you see the only service that is running here is the cluster IP that is my cluster that is running, and I just need to connect to this IP to do the administration. Okay. Some things that I can show you, as I already run the command I showed you before, I can run this command, get namespaces. And you see that I have this specific command here. That is the Azure Arc, okay? Because I already deployed. And also I have these Azure Monitor containers. So these two are deployed because of the Kubernetes Arc Enabled, okay? And what I did previously, I created this using that command. So I can go here, for example, I can look for Kubernetes service, and listed here, I'll see all my AKS and also this cluster that is my Azure Arc cluster. So you see the difference here is the Kubernetes Azure Arc. I can click on it and do all the administration from here. So what we can see here, it belongs to a resource group that belongs to this subscription, specifically this one. I can see the version, Kubernetes version here, for example. I can get some details on it. I even can get some monitoring hints here because I enable it. If you go to Insights, you'll see the option to enable it the first time. You just click enable and then it installs these Azure Monitor containers. Okay. After that, it will start to get information about the cluster here. Okay. It takes some time. In this case, I'm not running anything special, but it is already collecting some things. What can we see? These are some for cluster. We have some few reports here that we can click and check. But the good thing is I can see all nodes. If I have some Kubernetes cluster that is deployed using multiple machines, I would see all of them here. Because I'm using the Docker desktop, I only see my single machine because I only have one machine running here. I can see all controllers that are running here. And for all controllers, I can see the containers here. Okay. So if I select it, I can see more details, what is running, this capacity and all this stuff. Okay. I can see the controllers and do the same thing if I want. And I can see the status that everything is running well and the containers. It just needs more time to run to collect all the things, but in a few hours it will fill everything here with the users. So you can see the CPU or you can see the memory that you're using and how you can check this minimum, maximum amounts, 95% average, things like that. And you see that we have some things that are deployed like the Fluent and other stuff that the Flux that it will use to do the GitOps configuration if needed. Okay. So if I click here, I can see details from this guy. It will show me. Look, the CPU limit for it, CPU request that is configured. So some good things I can see here. Even the environment variables, you can check directly from the Azure port. Okay. One other thing you can do, and I enable the token authentication today, and you can see things directly from my cluster from the Azure portal. This time it's loading from the cloud, synchronizing. It will show here all namespaces that are deployed inside of my Kubernetes cluster. So I have two options here, or I can connect here and do those queries, for example, directly from the command line, or I can see it directly here through the portal. I can see all services here that are deployed, for example, and you see that I have a list of services running and the namespaces that they are running as well. And I can see the workloads, for example. Just a few things that are deployed on my cluster. Yeah, of course, configuration. I can check the YAML files from here. Let's find something like this one. So it's connected and I can see the things that I need from here. Okay. And if we check, we have those namespaces. I can use the kubectl, get all for a specific namespace, Azure Arc, for example. It will show all services deployed and all deployments to the Azure Arc namespace, all the things that you use to do this synchronization inside of my cluster. And we also have this for the monitoring, Azure Monitor containers. Okay. Delete this. And what I can do, I can go there and apply configuration here. So I'll create a new configuration. I will name it cluster config for this cluster, and I'll look at this repository. While he's doing this, I'll show you what we got inside of this repository. So let me open this URL. On this URL, this is what I call it as a single source of truth that we have. So here, you have some things that are defined for your cluster. For example, the namespaces that will be created. If you check here, it will create a new namespace called ITOps. Another one called Team A. And also the Team B here. Some specific configurations for Team A. You have, it will create an endpoint here, a config map with some data that you can connect, for example. And I have some apps. I have this demo. This demo have a deployment. They will have one replica running. The strategy of updates, and essentially it will take this image, existing image, and create a new pod inside of my cluster. And these are requirements that are needed to do the autoscale, for example. So it's defining some thresholds for memory and CPU usage here. This is important because if you try to use more memory than you require for the Kubernetes cluster, your application will be taken down. Okay, so be aware of these things when configuring your application. And to expose it, it will use the cluster IP in this port 8080. Okay, that's the idea. So going back here, we will see that it already finished the deploy, and we can also see this through the portal because it will reflect here. Okay. We'll see that it created cluster config. That is the name that I told you. I can get more details on it. So it will use Flux for it, and this is the repository that it will look at. Okay. So state is installed. If you go back there to my cluster. Just a minute because things are freezing. Okay, kubectl. Let me just zoom in a little bit. I'll do get namespaces again. Let's see how it responds. You will see that now we have that IT ops team A and team B created here without doing nothing. It just deployed, synchronized my configuration. kubectl get all. Now we'll bring the image and everything else here. In this case, I think that the YAML file is broken, but what we need to extract from here is we have something that is already running and working well, it will deploy and it will start to work right away. Okay. So in a single place, you can enable it, show the thing, and synchronize everything that you need to work on your applications. All right. Let me see if there's something else. Yeah. And you also can see from here, of course. When my machine froze, I think I lost connection. Let's check. You can see here, and I'll go there to the default now. Let's go back. Let's see the sources and ingresses. I don't have any ingresses, but I have some services deployed now. And it will see this Arc Kubernetes theme. That is the one I just deployed. Any doubts on that? Any question? So we can see the IP that is running. There's no external IP because it's just a cluster IP. Cluster IP doesn't have external IP. And this is the configuration. So ports that I'm running port 8080 and the pods. I can see the status of it. So the same things I can see from kubectl, I can check from here. Okay. And in the end, what we can do, I can go here and simply delete my cluster, but this wouldn't remove the things that the Arc Azure Arc installed. So usually what you can do, you can go back there and just run this delete command, and it will delete the resource on Azure and also remove the configuration from here. Let me show you. The thing is, we have multiple things. Basically, what we'll do, it will remove this Azure Arc and probably remove the Azure Monitor containers. But the IT Ops, Team A, Team B, all these configurations that are custom, it doesn't remove, okay? Let it just finish and then I'll show you. Let's see how it's going. Let me go back to the resource group. Sample RG. It deleted the cluster and probably it's just removing the namespaces from the cluster here because I don't have any resource here on Azure anymore. But that's the idea. CTL, yeah, namespaces. You will see, yeah, Azure Monitor content is still there. What you can do, you can simply go there after CTL, delete namespace. So it will stop to synchronize everything. And I will delete this tree also. And the services. Yeah, it's removing the deployments. All right. Oh, and just a trick I did it here because when you need to connect, you need to run these commands. I'll put this on chat. So this is how you connect. And let me find in this session, service account token. This is what it requires to connect to your cluster to check everything from the cloud. So you need to create a service account, and you see these are all Kubernetes commands. So I'll create the service account. I'll attach this service account with a role. There is the cluster admin to give permission to this user to access all contents, and then you get the secret name and the token. And for Windows, you see that all these commands are using bash. So what I did as a trick, I run these two, and it can run even on the PowerShell, but you can use something like a bash inside of Windows Terminal just to get this information. So I could run those commands from bash directly from here. And you see that it works, and it's now connected to my cluster. Yeah. And that's all that I wanted to show you today. So we have some time now for Q&A. Do you have any questions and doubts on this? Anything that you would like to ask? Well, if we don't have any other questions, so thank you very much for this opportunity. And if you have any other things that you'd like to ask, here's my mail. You can contact me. And thank you very much to be here today.
Thank you, Marcelo, and thank you everyone for joining us today. So I'll share a feedback form with you all. You guys can fill it so that we can make the events better for you. And we will post about our next event on our Discord channel. We will provide you the link over here as well. So yeah, please check them. Thank you.
Thank you. See you. Bye-bye.